15 Things You Didn't Know About Napoleon Hill. Welcome to Alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. Hello Aluxers, and welcome to another exciting original video presented by Alux.com. Today we're revealing some interesting and surprising facts about Napoleon Hill, a writer and businessman who has inspired countless other successful businessmen, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and future billionaires. Napoleon Hill was born October 26, 1883 in Virginia. His life was full of setbacks and comebacks from the time he was a child until his death in 1970. He grew up in poverty, but his writing career opened doors for him to meet some of the wealthiest and most influential people of his time. This led to him writing one of the best-selling self-help books in history, Think and Grow Rich. He also wrote 10 other books like How to Sell Your Way Through Life, The Magic Ladder to Success, and You Can Work Your Own Miracles. He is sometimes a controversial figure as the accuracy of many of his accounts have been called into question, and he got himself into legal trouble more than once for his questionable business practices. Still, his books remain a great influence for present and future millionaires and billionaires, including many of you Aluxers out there. During his lifetime, Napoleon experienced the struggles of being incredibly poor and the finest that wealth has to offer. He was faced with incredible challenges and unbelievable opportunities, but no matter what, he kept pushing himself to do better, and he wanted to pass his lessons on to as many people as possible. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Alux. Napoleon Hill continues to inspire people nearly 50 years after his death. So let's take a closer look at this influential man with 15 things you didn't know about Napoleon Hill. Number 1. His stepmother is responsible for him becoming a writer. Hill had humble beginnings, being born in a one-room cabin near the Appalachian town of Pound in southwest Virginia. His mother died when he was only 9 years old, but his father remarried 2 years later to a woman named Martha. Martha had a profound influence on Napoleon, taming the so-called wild child and making him go to both school and church. She told him he should use his imagination to become a writer and offered to trade him his 6-shooter for a typewriter, and he took her up on that offer. Number 2. He was first married at the age of 15. As mentioned, Napoleon was known to be a wild child, and this occasionally got him into some difficult situations. When he was 15 years old, a girl accused him of fathering her child, and since he didn't have any proof otherwise, the girl's father demanded that they get married. Shortly after, the girl recanted her claim and the marriage was annulled. Number 3. Hill placed a personal ad in the paper to find a possible wife. In 1908, while he was living in Washington, D.C., Hill placed a personal ad in the paper to find a female companion. In the ad, he wrote that he was seeking a young lady for mutual friendship with the possibility of leading to matrimony. He arranged a meeting with one woman who answered the ad, but he ended up marrying her cousin instead. He and Florence Horner were married in 1910. Number 4. He left his wife and sons behind to find fame and fortune. After marrying Florence in 1910, the couple had 3 sons: James, born in 1911, Napoleon, born in 1912, and David, born in 1918. Hill grew discontent, though, and believed he needed to pursue fame and fortune. He left his family behind and moved to Chicago in late 1912. For the next 17 years, he spent very little time with Florence and his sons, only visiting briefly over the years. He and Florence divorced in 1935. Number 5. He was arrested for selling fraudulent stocks. In 1918, the state of Illinois issued 2 warrants of arrest for Hill for selling fraudulent stocks. Hill had established the George Washington Institute in 1915. He gave the school a $100,000 valuation and split the ownership into 10,000 stocks. He gave himself 51% of the stock and started selling shares to his students at $10 per share. The problem with this was that the school's assets were actually valued at around $1,200, not $100,000. Hill turned himself in and didn't end up facing any serious legal consequences. Number 6. He agreed to work without a salary for Andrew Carnegie for 20 years. When Hill met Andrew Carnegie for an interview for Bob Taylor's magazine, Carnegie challenged him to work for 20 years without pay to determine the principles of success and compile them in a book so that every generation wouldn't have to find success by trial and error. In exchange, Carnegie said he would introduce him to some of the wealthiest and most successful men of their time. Hill fully dedicated himself to the project, and Carnegie held up his end of the deal as well, introducing him to men like Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, Henry Ford, and John D. Rockefeller. Eventually, this project would lead to Hill's incredibly successful book, Think and Grow Rich. Number 7. He lost everything in the Great Depression. After Hill published his first book, The Law of Success, in 1928, he was making around $2,500 per month in royalties, which is around $28,000 at today's valuation. This allowed him to buy a mansion in the Catskills Mountains, along with 600 acres of property and a Rolls-Royce. He was also able to bring Florence and his sons to live with him. However, when the stock market crashed in 1929 and the Great Depression set in, he was forced to sell his property and give up his lavish lifestyle. It was only a few years after this that Florence would file for divorce. Number 8. His book remains one of the most influential books for self-made millionaires of today. The list of entrepreneurs, self-made millionaires, successful businessmen, and celebrities who attribute at least a part of their success to Napoleon Hill's writings is quite impressive and includes Arnold Schwarzenegger, Damon John, Grant Cardone, Lana Del Rey, Brian Tracy, and Tony Robbins. If you want to find out more about that last name on the list, click in the upper right-hand corner to watch our video of the 15 things you didn't know about Tony Robbins. Number 9. Think and Grow Rich almost had a very different name. At first, Hill's publisher, Andrew Pelton, was not very excited about the manuscript for Think and Grow Rich. He thought it was too similar to Hill's first book, The Law of Success. He eventually agreed to publish it under one condition, that the title of the book be changed to Use Your Noodle to Win More Boodle. Thankfully, though, this title was changed along the way to Think and Grow Rich, and this would become Hill's greatest work. Number 10. Over 100 million copies of his book have been sold worldwide. Hill published his best-selling book, Think and Grow Rich, during the Great Depression, and it immediately gained considerable attention. Throughout his lifetime, the book sold 20 million copies, but since his death in 1970, the book has sold over 100 million copies worldwide. It was ranked the 6th best-selling business book 70 years after it was published. Number 11. Hill was accused of committing fraud with his lumber business. In 1907, Hill co-founded the Acre Hill Lumber Company and was accused of buying $10,000 to $20,000 worth of lumber on credit, selling the lumber well above market value, pocketing the cash, and never paying his creditors. His creditors were spread across the country in Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Indiana. By the middle of 1908, word had gotten around the lumber community of Hill's fraud, and his creditors and the police were looking for him. The newspapers of the time called this the Acre Hill sensation. He fled to Washington, D.C. and started going by his middle name, Napoleon, instead of Oliver. Number 12. He owned a mansion in Mount Dora, Florida. After the success of Think and Grow Rich, Hill bought a mansion called The Castle in Mount Dora, Florida. He lived there throughout the 1930s and 40s until his second wife, Rosa, divorced him. The home overlooked Lake Dora and had a swimming pool on the roof. The home was torn down, though, in the 1980s. Number 13. He lost most of his royalty money for Think and Grow Rich in his second divorce. Hill married Rosa Lee Beeland in 1937. They both worked together on the manuscript for Think and Grow Rich, and it was Rosa that convinced the publisher to go forward with the book. The book was incredibly successful, and by 1940, Hill was worth more than $1 million. But there was trouble in the marriage, and the two eventually got divorced. However, because the copyrights for his book were in his wife's name based on his lawyer's advice, she got nearly all of the royalties for Think and Grow Rich. His wife reportedly ran off with the lawyer, and Hill was left to start over once again. Number 14. He was nearly assassinated. In 1926, when Hill learned that police were not enforcing the law when it came to local gangsters selling narcotics and bootleg liquor to area schoolchildren, he went to the Ohio governor and asked for an investigation. A publisher who was going to expose the gangsters in his paper was gunned down, and the gangsters planned to assassinate Napoleon too. The attempt failed because Hill's car broke down, so he didn't get to go home where the gunmen were waiting for him. When he heard the news of the publisher's murder, he fled to West Virginia. The near-death experience left Napoleon mentally shaken. This led to a depression, which he said felt like a living death for over a year. Number 15. Oprah Winfrey credits Think and Grow Rich for her success. Oprah has read Think and Grow Rich at least 13 times in her life, and she gives much credit to the book for making her a billionaire. Others who credit the book at least partially for their success include Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Michael Jordan, Barbara Corcoran, and Rob Dyrdek. Now that you've learned some more about Napoleon Hill, do you plan on checking into more of his writings? Let us know what you think in the comments. Still here? Here's a bonus fact just for you. Ken Norton, a professional boxer who competed from 1967 to 1981, credits Think and Grow Rich for giving him the mindset needed to go on a 14-fight winning streak, including a shocking victory over Muhammad Ali in 1973 to win the North American Boxing Federation heavyweight title. Thank you for spending some time with us, Aluxers. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpicked these videos, which we recommend you watch next. Thank you for being an Aluxer, and we'll see you back tomorrow.